The thing about making things out of salvaged materials and scrap and leftover bits of other projects is you tend to accumulate a lot of those things. And you start to see what those things want to become if you stare at your junk long enough. Maybe that's not the best phrasing, but once you see the potential, you can't unsee it, and eventually you need to give in and start pulling things together. At least I'll get to use up some of this crap, and that's kind of the goal here, to do this project with only the parts and materials I have on hand. The budget of this is $0. That's absurd. I love it. I think the first thing to do is going to be to strip down the rototiller and see if this engine even runs. This was a free by the side of the road thing a few years back, and I got it running kind of poorly, but did manage to do some rototilling with it. But I think for this, we're going to need to get it running a little bit better. Definitely some oil leak there. Turns over at least. Well, that's what came out of the fuel tank, which is not gasoline. I think we can pretty well assume we're not going to use that. Yeah. How does that attach? I'm going to go out on a limb and say we're not going to use this carb either. I pirated the pull start from this for another project that I ended up not using it for. Can't find the shroud though, but we'll deal with all that later. This is dragging a little bit there. We'll see if it self-clearances. For now, I've just got a socket and a drill, and we can just spin it over with that. Spark plug looks pretty good. Alright, we got spark. I mean, there's not a whole lot of reason we wouldn't get spark. Give her a little snort of this. Alright, let's figure out a carb. I've got this one that was a brand new spare that I got for my rope tow snowblower motor. It's obviously a little too big to fit on there, but this part's made to fit on there. This was my first time trying to weld dirty cast aluminum, and it was a learning experience for sure. Mostly learned that I don't like welding dirty cast aluminum. Might not have gotten this quite at the angle I thought I had it, but should be good enough. Alright, we got some gas in there. You can tell because it's leaking out of the bowl because I used that gasket on the rope tow. I'll go choke, I guess. Obviously needs tuning, but we got a runner. We'll go ahead and change the oil in here too, since the oil that's in here looks like... I'm not quite sure what that looks like, but it ain't oil. You know, if you're like me and you've got so many projects and parts of projects that People might think you're a hoarder. You can let them know that you're not, and you're just a project collector with my Professional Project Collector Association t-shirt available at jeremymakethings.net. I'll take that too. I thought this was a good idea, but turned out it was just going to end up bending the pulley. Sometimes it's easier to drive it farther on. And then you can get it off. So, now that we've got this free, we need to figure out how to attach this to this, and, well, this to everything else. Dug around in my bearings. I found these. They could work. I might set those aside for the front wheel. I also found the wheel bearings that I took off the Jeep. They're not in great shape, not really good enough to use on the Jeep, but I might be able to use them here. Problem is that they don't fit through the center bore on there, so I could use them on one side of the hub, but not the other. These aren't too far off being a good size to use for the headset. I think what I'm going to go with is some of these pillow block bearings. These are 3/4 inch bore, that's 5/8, but I think there's enough meat there I can put that on a shaft. Then I'm just left figuring out how to attach a shaft to this. I've got this hub that I just took off my wife's Subaru. Been thinking about that. Bearings on it are shot. It's the right shape, but it's the wrong bolt pattern. I was thinking I could make up a adapter plate, then just turn a shaft that fits in the middle and weld it to that. I've got 5 wheel studs that came off of the Jeep. Those will work. So making an adapter plate wouldn't be hard. But then I realized if I'm going to do that, I might as well just make a flange and weld it to a shaft and be done with that. Just over 2 and 5/8, we'll call it. So that's it, fits through the middle there. Let's kind of try to mock this up a little bit. So if I go like that, that leaves me some meat here that I could potentially mount a brake rotor on. Give me enough clearance there, and then that would get turned down. Yeah. This will give me a little bit of a shoulder that I can butt this up against. This is the thickest material I've tried to do on my plasma cutter, and I definitely did not have the feeds right, so it didn't come out great. But I left enough extra material to be able to clean it up on the lathe. I also put a big chamfer on it to help with welding. The lug studs ended up being slightly looser than I would have liked, so I'd use some green Loctite to help hold them in. One of them was still loose, so I just tacked it in with a little bit of weld. Well, since that all looks about right, I'm going to go this distance plus this distance plus half the thickness of this and turn that down to 3/4. Now we can start looking at mocking up the frame for this with some random bits of old exercise equipment. And then the motor would be kinda right there. Oh, I think I like that. Maybe kind of keep them more parallel like that. And then the motor, can we set the motor in between it a little bit? Oh yeah. For right now, this is just gonna get some random bits of scrap tack to it. It occurred to me before I mount the motor, I should check and see if we're kind of even in the right ballpark on the gear ratio. Right now, this would be about a 3-to-1 reduction, which is not even close to what we need. Doing the calculation on an 18-inch tall tire, that would give us about 60 miles an hour, which is way faster than this thing should ever go. So I'd like to do a little bit more work and try to get the top speed down and get some more torque on this. So I'm looking at the bearings that I've got available and the various pulleys I've got. This one, good size, but it's pretty bent. This one's also in pretty bad shape, a little bit smaller. That one's in decent shape. I think with a little modification, I can combine these together and make it work. I used the pattern that I had from doing the pulleys on my milling machine, and did not have nearly enough metal melted on the first pour. The pattern was really oversized, so I cut it down a little bit, and the second pour went a little bit better, but it still had some issues. The third pour burned down, fell over, and then sunk into the swamp. But the fourth pour, well, the fourth pour actually still had some shrink defects, but I think it's good enough. I've done a whole bunch of pulleys like this in various videos, so I'm going to kind of speed run through this, and inevitably I'll forget to leave a card here in case you want to learn more. I need a shaft for the pulley, and I've got this rifle barrel that came to me as a hammer handle, but since I like my elbows, I replaced it with a wooden handle. Now it gets to be part of the scooter. Turns out the bore is the right size to tap for 5/16 fine thread for a retaining bolt. I think that trying to get this all packaged right is going to be the biggest challenge and sort of the difference between success and failure. So I want to get this motor back as far as I can, but right now the muffler is hitting on the pulley. So we'll get rid of the muffler for now and figure it out later. I don't want this thing to be annoyingly loud, so we'll come back to that, but for now let's figure out where the motor lives. Since the motor sits off to one side, the motor mount is asymmetric, and it was right about now that I realized I'd welded it in upside down. It was also too far back, and I kind of wanted it angled down a little bit more, so best thing to do is cut it out, flip it over. Alright, take two. Yeah, well, that's close. Yeah, there's just a bunch of slag and crap in that slot. That'll work. Alright, so here's my idea, and hear me out on this one. I'm going to use the idler pulley from the rototiller in the same way that it was, as a belt tensioner. Pulling this belt tight also pulls that belt tight. Using a go-kart clutch on here would probably be the way to go, but I don't have one of those, and, well, I'm not the one that makes up the rules here. But I think this idea will work, and then this will get connected up to like a foot pedal lever. So when you step onto it, it engages the motor, and off you go. I've got to shorten this up so the pulley lines up with the belt. To keep it square, I'm just going to do it on the milling machine. And I'll thread the stud to match, since the A-clip on here disappeared into the ether, as they tend to do. Maybe I'll just clean that up with a die. I think that'll work. With that figured out, it's time to weld everything solid, and I was going to MIG weld this just to move the process along, and almost immediately ran out of MIG wire. I'll have to find another project to buy some of that for, so I have it left over to finish this project. We'll just say it's more TIG practice. Also put a square tube in as a cross member so I can get rid of the temporary one, mostly to save my shins walking around the shop. I haven't walked into it yet, but it's inevitable that it would happen. Yeah, we'll do that eventually. It works. Well, this thing certainly has a long way to go, but I think the concept is coming together. Obviously, I'm going to need some guards on here so that I don't get burned or eaten by the belts, or the flywheel, or any of the other dangerous spinning stuff. And it needs things like an exhaust, brakes, front wheel, steering, somewhere to stand, a throttle. So this should be pretty good content for quite a while to come.
I want to say a big thank you to everyone that helps support the channel, either through the purchase of the t-shirts, or on Patreon, or through YouTube memberships. And thank you for watching, and I hope you'll stick around to see if this thing's even remotely rideable. It certainly is absurd.